That's right. You're going to love the sermon today. Well, I don't know that. I might lay an egg, but I think. Oscar, we got too many people coming to Bible class. We got to keep backing up. That sound like a problem? If you want to open to Acts 18, we'll continue there. Keep Lori and Bill in your prayers. They're both kind of not feeling great. And I think Janet worked Billy Wiles to death this past weekend, so pray for him on multiple fronts. Again, you can't pray the Lord remove his burden, similar to Kevin and Holly, but you just enable them to get through. Oscar, do you handle it? Okay. 10-4. Oh, same. Yeah, it's going right. Well, that's similar. 10-4. Yeah. Oh, he got it. Who does? Oh, man, where did I just see her? I ran into her somewhere and got to visit with her son. But man, if you're sick, we're back to the time of the year. If you're sick, stay home. Right? If you ain't feeling good, stay home. Right. I cannot. It's killing my brain that I can't think of where I saw her and a couple of friends at. It was all, I don't remember. Might have been that softball thing that I played in. I don't know.
Williams home for the same reason.
Okay. That's right. All right. And Ms. Margie?
I have a list.
You have a list? Did you give it to Kevin already?
Buck's brother, Buck's sister is in Gainesville. Serious problem. Uncle's brother is in Gainesville with serious problem. Uncle's sister is having some kind of issues with her throat. She's going to have some additional on the end.
Not Phyllis, but the other sister?
The other sister, Rhonda. And there was something else. I can't remember.
Is that not? And then Opal.
Opal is 6%.
And so we're kind of back to that time of, like I said, if you ain't feeling good, we love you, but stay away. We love you, but stay over there. And if you need something, we'll drop it off. If you don't want to have to get out, we'll have cars we'll deliver. We'll drop off. I have not heard a recent one, but here I'll give you all of the details about what happened. I couldn't put it all in that one text. I'll give you what happened. All right, so the first one. During surgery, they were trying to isolate one of the aneurysms, and she had a blowout on the opposite side. And that blood had to go somewhere, and so they had to drill a couple of holes, put in some drain tubes, induce coma, and paralyze her for the next several days. less than 6 months old. And then he sent me the other one that I sent out kind of to everybody else of kind of some of the after effects, I guess, of some of that. So I haven't heard a recent update beyond that, but like him not feeling good now, he may be somewhat out of the loop, but that it was not good. So that's that. Yes, that's his great. I said his niece, I think in the text, and should have been his great niece, but definitely want to keep her in our prayers for sure. For sure. All right. Anything else? Any praises you want to share? Anybody got any good news? Yes, ma'am.
That video of Brandon is traveling. I've had so many calls that they are just really impressed with what he had to say.
Oh, you mean like the sermon that he did? Come on. He's famous.
Don't tell me.
Hey, that's good stuff.
And she'll be here in the next couple of weeks or so. So she's going.
She needs to.
If she goes.
Hey, we'll set it up where he can preach again when she gets here. We'll set it up where he can preach it live to her. She gets to hear it in person. I like it. That's a good praise. Anybody else got any praises they want to share? Yes, sir. Starts a new job tomorrow. Kind of a transition, new adventure for Joel. And I love law enforcement. I respect it, and I'm thankful for you and the job that you did. But I ain't gonna lie that I'm a little bit happy that you're not having to do that anymore. So there's a price that you pay to be part of that, and we need to be thankful for those that endure that to keep us safe. But I ain't gonna lie that I'm personally thankful you don't have to anymore. So. And my father-in-law's a little worried that you're going to give over security of the church building to him. He said last time, you can't be gone or anything like that. And we definitely don't want him in charge of security. He'll just hit everybody with a 2x4 as they come in, and that's not good for anybody. So when in doubt, whack him with the 2x4, right, Jeeps, and then figure out, swing first, ask questions later. But I'm thankful for you. Pray that God blesses that mightily. Any other praise? I'd rather talk about this. We need this. I need to pick me up every once in a while. You got any praises you want to share? Back to school? Anything? No? All right. Well, if there's not anything further, right? Mr. Bobby, can I pick on you to kick us off?
Lord, thank you so much for your grace and your mercy. Thank you also for your son and the sacrifice that was made on our behalf. May we each day look to your advice and your word to help us throughout each day with problems with family or people out in the community that we can help as well as ourselves. Please be with those that are sick or not able to be with us this morning, that you will give a portion of their health back and they can be back with us once again. Please be with Daniel student, help teach us more about your word and things we can apply to our life to help us grow and be better Christians and help gather other people to the Lord. All the things we do pray in Jesus' name.
Amen. All right, so Acts chapter 18. What's a missionary journey? I know that's kind of a weird kind of question, but what when we're saying that that's what we're talking about, what's a missionary journey?
Spread the gospel.
Huh? Spread the gospel? How else would you answer that? I can't hear.
Teach.
Oh, absolutely. And who's doing them? Who's are we talking about? And do anybody know what number 1 we're on? We're going to wrap up, Lord willing, number 2 today and get into number 3. That's where we're at. And so it related to that question, the entire book of Acts, what's its purpose? All right, and some people see if this helps you, and I'll ask you what you think they mean. Some people call the book of Acts a bridge book. A bridge book. What 4 books come before Acts? Everything that comes after Acts is, what do we call those? letters, or the other term that we sometimes might use is an epistle, but that's it. They're letters. Letters written by who? Paul, so most of them. You got inspired. You got Peter's a couple. You got Gospels, which what's the theme of the Gospels? This is Jesus. This is who he is. This is where he came from. This is what he did. And then you've got all these letters to churches by inspired authors, kind of telling them how to live the Jesus life. And you go straight from Jesus to a bunch of letters, and some of them sorting out problems, and some of them talking about this. Well, Acts is the bridge book to figure out where these churches come from. Where did these Christians come from? I love kind of comparing the book of Acts to the epistle and finding out, oh, that might have been where that church started, right? That's where its beginning was, or that's what its environment was. And seeing how it got started, and then the letter that's written afterward. And we're going to get, hopefully, Lord willing, to some of Ephesus today, which is probably, it's probably the New Testament church we get the most look at. You get kind of beginning, you get middle with it, and then you even get it mentioned again in the book of Revelation later on. Like, we get a lot of information about the church at Ephesus. So that's kind of what we're traveling. Paul's traveling. He's preaching gospels. The missionary journey is also, and there is teaching. There are new conversions going on, but the stated purpose of the trips was, that's right. And so, he does the first one where he's new territory, all of them. Then we have the Jerusalem kind of conference, and let's re-strengthen. Well, that's going to be the same thing he's going to do on the third. And he's revisiting the same towns that he's already been through, strengthening brethren that are already there, helping teach new ones. We're going to see some of that today. He doesn't just birth these churches and then they're kind of left to their own. Like, it's kind of making sure that they're being built up and encouraged and under hostility, right? He leaves because he's kind of a pressure point. You think all the pressure leaves just because Paul leaves town? When you've got Jews that have been converted from synagogues, which is the place he usually goes first, you reckon there's any community tension that they have to deal with? Just all of that. I just want all that as a backdrop in your brain, that real life conversion and growth and hardship is happening in some of these letters.
I love that word bridge, because it's also a bridge from the old law to this new. And
Excellent.
It's so huge in Acts, and that's why that he has to keep going back, to reinforce.
And really,
we have to get that too.
we talk a lot about, we will talk about the emperors and what they did to Christianity. Most of Paul's opposition most of Jesus's opposition was, it's like, yes, they use the Gentile, courts in some regards. In fact, we see a little bit of that in 18 where we finished Wednesday, where they try to bring Crispus in there and the others and basically say, look, this is according to your own law. I don't care. Other times they do. Well, when they figure out if it's according to our own law, then they switch their tactics and he's against Caesar now. See, we'll get a false witness to say whatever we got to say. But most of the pressure is the Jews who don't understand he's the fulfillment of everything y'all were waiting for. And they missed it. So I think that's an important it's so exciting to see the new conversions, but just because it's not always stated, it was difficult. You got families divided, you got synagogues divided, and now new Christian churches starting, and I'm sure there's some tension that's part of all of that. Speaking of 18, where we started, well, in case you missed Wednesday night, when he comes to Corinth, we got a guy named Crispus, who we saw was mentioned in the book of Corinthians. He was a synagogue leader, verse 8, and he ends up getting converted. Awesome. That's the leader of the synagogue, just got converted. And then we didn't cover this as much, but Paul is encouraged in verse 9, do not be afraid, keep on speaking, do not be silent. Now, why do you have to be told that?
The opposition. You're afraid of the opposition.
You wouldn't have to tell somebody, don't be afraid, unless there was a potential of, there's something to be afraid of. And has Paul experienced any of that? his confidence to go back to these same towns where he's been run out of, had to be snuck out of, stoned and left for dead in one of them, and he's not afraid to still revisit those towns to strengthen those brethren. And so here he's told, don't be afraid, I'm with you. No one is going to attack you or harm you because I have many people in this city. And as a result, he gets to stay in Corinth. How long? Year and a half. Can you imagine Paul can shuck some corn in a year and a half? And he can teach and he can educate. You know, it's not just making disciples and then turning them loose and they got to figure it out on their own, right? He gets a chance to plant seed and then water it as well while he's there. And he gets a year and a half to kind of help the church get their legs underneath them in some regards. So I kind of like that. So he's creating enough uproar that there's an attack on him finally in verse 12. They try to drag him, verse 14, in front of Gallio. And he said, look, if it's your own thing, y'all handle it yourselves. And so the crowd's mad. They got to take it out on somebody. And who do they take it out on in verse 17? Poor old Sosthenes. But we read in 1 Corinthians chapter 1 and verse 1, how is Sosthenes referenced? Our brother. In fact, the book is addressed, Paul, an apostle of Jesus Christ, and Sosthenes, our brother. Two different rulers of the synagogue that in the city of Corinth have been converted. That's awesome stuff to me. All right, so let's read 18. Let's just read through the end. So that'd be 18 through 28. Who all wants to read this morning? Joel, if you'll do 18 through 23 is a pretty good stopping point because we get a transition word there. Kevin, you want the rest? All right.
Paul stayed in Corinth for some time after that, then said goodbye to his brothers and sisters, and they went to nearby cities. What does that have?
I have Syria in mind, but you may have something different.
I have Cenchrea.
Woo, okay. Okay, yeah, I got that later on. Yeah.
There he shake his head according to Jewish custom, marking the end of a vow. Then he set sail for Syria, taking Priscilla and Aquila with him. They stopped first at the port of Ephesus, where Paul left the others behind. While he was there, he went to the synagogue to reason with the Jews. They asked him to stay longer, but he declined. As he left, however, he said, I will come back later, God willing. Then he set sail from Ephesus. The next stop was at the port of Caesarea. From there he went up and visited the church of Jerusalem, and then went back to Antioch. After spending some time in Antioch, Paul went back through Galatia and Phrygia, visiting and strengthening all the believers.
Now a certain Jew named Apollos, born in Alexandria, an eloquent man and mighty in the scriptures, came to Ephesus. This man had been instructed in the way of the Lord, and being fervent in spirit, he spoke and taught accurately the things of the Lord, though he knew only the baptism of John. So he began to speak boldly in the synagogue. When Aquila and Priscilla heard him, they took him aside and explained to him the way of God more accurately. And when he desired to cross to Achaia, the brethren wrote, exhorting the disciples to receive him. And when he arrived, he greatly helped those who had believed through grace. For he vigorously refuted the Jews publicly, showing from the scriptures that Jesus is the Christ.
Man, I want to jump to it, but I'm going to hold back. But just, is the Lord providing workers? Paul can't do it all. And as he, in each city, new workers, Priscilla and Aquila we're going to talk about, Apollos is rising up. We know that when we get to Ephesus, there's going to be elders that he cares deeply for, that he's going to say goodbye to later on. But like the Lord is giving the increase and new workers are coming along. I got to brag on Priscilla and Aquila a little bit. We're first introduced to them at the beginning of chapter 18. What do they do for a living? Tent makers, right? And that's kind of why Paul gets a connection with them, because they share the same trade, and that's who he's staying with and working alongside. And then do y'all remember us talking about why he got to quit making tents at the beginning of chapter 18 and could devote himself to the work completely? Money from Macedonia, which a lot of times I give the credit to Philippi. They're not the only ones, but that's the ones he specifically says. All right, well, let's look at, as we get to this section, he's living with them, right, in Corinth. and Paul's ready to leave and like do some more missionary journeying, and what's Aquila and Priscilla decide they're going to do? We're going to pack up and move and go with you. I don't want to just rush past that. Like, they're comfortable, they're set up in Corinth, and we want to support Paul in this ministry. We know we can all share the same trade and help each other that way. And there's kind of times where Paul has to do that off and on, but they literally decide to move so they can go help Paul be ministers. And kind of the way I read this is Paul leaves them in Ephesus and he has to go on. And they're the ones that kind of work with Apollos before Paul even gets back. It's kind of like they travel. He drops them off there for a little bit. Then he goes on and then he comes back and they're going to get to work together. But I want to give credibility or some credit to these brethren that are willing to do that and travel kind of for the gospel's sake. Anything about him and his hair cut off and a vow, what is that possibly a nod to? I mean, that's kind of what you're pointed to. And we don't know, I don't want to speculate whatever, but that may be part of him trying to the Jews, becoming a Jew and having some relatability and have a connection with them. So they get to Ephesus, verse 19. That's where he leaves them and he goes, he does go in and reason some, but you're going to find that he's going to travel here in a little bit and leaves them behind. Where does he go first? Who is he reason? I mean, that word reasoning, reasonable. And are we reasonable, right? Are we, like I was reading a passage in Philippians. Let me pull up on my other Bible. I got to preach at y'all every once in a while, as we're doing this. We're not just studying them, we're studying it for our own sake. In Philippians 4, verse 5, it says, let your reasonableness be known to everyone. He's going to every town, and we've read this over and over, how many times the word reason is used and showing that Jesus is the Christ. And Philippians 4 says, let your reasonableness be known. I just got to ask, what does the word reasonable mean? Okay, all right. And other translations. So what does that mean? If that's supposed to be known to everybody, then what is it? What does that look like? What would I be looking for? How do I know someone's reasonable or moderation or gentleness, John?
They'll be able to see that they can talk with
Okay.
you. Communicate with you without you just like drawing a line and saying, this is it. No way, no way. I ain't changing.
And I'm pretty much never like that ever. Right? Everybody else just batting 1,000 on that. Why are you giving me that look, bro? Yeah. Kevin?
I'm just going to say, it's a person that doesn't just talk, they also listen.
Okay. All right. Because that's got to be the concept of reason is not just I do all the preaching at you. If I'm reasonable, I've got to be able to listen and digest. Wes?
It seems like even a little humility.
Sure.
And you don't think that often. We think Paul is bold as he was, but he had it.
There has to be a knack of why he's as successful as he is, and it's not because he didn't even tell you himself. He's not necessarily mighty in word, right? Or his presence was not, but I think his ability to meet people where they were and possibly listen and talk back and forth. Carrie, what were you going to say?
Well, he remembered how he was. And if you deal with
Oh.
people that way, because we were all sinners, we all needed saving. So if you have that attitude, that's how, like you said, one sin doesn't look any different from the other.
And so maybe his militant, like full steam forward, helps him relate to other people that are not. G-Paul?
Opposite of argument, you run into a lot of people that they just want to argue.
That's right. And it's no different, though. It's in the same vein as the Epicureans and Stoics who just want to sit around and debate anything new. They just want to debate. They just want to argue. What do we want to argue about today? Was it Mr. Oscar Barber? Did one of y'all have a hand raised back there? I didn't want to. Let your reasonableness be known or evident to everybody. Am I reasonable? Does that mean I have to agree with everything people have to say?
take out your gospel 2x4.
You don't take out your gospel 2x4 or just any 2x4, but the gospel. Well, I've got a, like a golf bag. You got like a 9 iron, 8. I don't just have a gospel 2x4. I've got like an assortment of 2x4s. I've got a political 2x4, a sports 2x4. The fact that I'm just always right 2x4. That's the one that probably gets used the most. Kind of like my driver. It's just your go-to.
My dad used to refer to it as you have one of them haircuts, you go anywhere and fit right in.
Say that one. You're gonna have to explain that.
It was something my dad used to say, that he said, describing a person. He'd say, he's got one of them haircuts, he can go anywhere and fit right in. And Paul must have had that.
He must have had it. He can fit in anywhere. My dad used to say that's the mark of a gentleman, is that they can fit in or relate to anybody anywhere. It doesn't mean, like I said, degree, whatever. And it's not being a pretender. It's just part of being a gentleman is I can get along in any environment. And he has that. Is your reasonableness, I mean, it's so easy to criticize, it's easy to praise Paul because he's doing the teaching and we want to praise the ones that listen and we want to dog cuss the ones that don't. But what are the odds that I'd be on one of the sides that wouldn't be reasonable? How reasonable have I ever been? Have I ever had to change? I got lucky and hit the lottery that I grew up in the right quote unquote church. When have you ever had to change it? Have you ever wiggled on anything? Or is it possible you've ever been wrong? Kind of thing. Bill?
I was just gonna say that, you can be all those things, reasonable, non-argumentative, you can be meek, gentle. I think somebody mentioned that if you don't live it, if you don't do it with the right attitude, people are gonna see through that.
Mm-hmm.
I think this last verse of 18, it talks about Apollos.
Yes.
He vigorously refuted his Jewish opponents in public debate. So everything that we mentioned is not weakness. It's a sign of strength to be able to reason and to be meek and control your emotions and sometimes even your temper.
Well, you cut your own leg. If you're not reasonable, if you can't be taught anything, you literally are handicapping yourself. Because if I can't ever let anybody teach me anything, then that means I have to know what? Everything. And guess what? I mean, I know everything there is to know about mechanicking. So I can't ever let anybody teach me how to do something, then I'm going to be limited. Right? Or about a computer, or about faith and religion, or just name it. If I'm always the smartest one and I can't let anybody teach me anything, and I'm not willing to listen to anybody else, then I'm cutting my own legs off of growth and being able to learn or see. I mean, I think about like, John, you kind of know a little bit about mechanicking, right? He's worked on my stuff plenty. Have you ever learned anything from Chad that you didn't know about how something works? You know what I mean? But your stuff. And I imagine there's times where, and I'm thinking like Billy Wilder, hey, you know what? I never knew that you could, everybody, I don't care how mastered you are in an area, you always have something you could learn, even if it's not like you might have known the process, but a more efficient way to do it. Or there's always something to learn. And if I'm not reasonable, I'll never get there.
I just had someone tell me last week, and I feel like that's fine, probably doesn't have anything to do with any church. Because that particular person is a Christian, I don't want nothing.
Right.
And I hear that a lot.
Like if that's the picture of what a Christian is, I don't want nothing.
Of what Christianity does to an individual, that individual treats everybody else that way.
Or we're like this is where individual Christians have reputations and then churches get reputations. And right, wrong, or indifferent. Sometimes reputations are true and sometimes they're terrible misrepresentations. So you got to be careful about what you hear. But when it's like a body of religious people and their kids are some of the meanest, nastiest ones walking the hallways, and that's preachers' kids and the youth group that gets posted all over everywhere, and they're some of the meanest kids to walk the hallway, the ones that actually know them, that sends a message. I don't want anything to do with it. That's what Christians look like. No, thank you. Right? Or how you guys know the waiters and waitresses on Sunday afternoon aren't always excited about church folk because they're some of the most demanding, nitpicky, and were bad tempers, supposedly. It sends a message. How we interact. This is where I want to pause that Apollos is going to be our model of someone who was reasonable, who was educated and eloquent and having success, and he's willing. Let's pray. We want to praise Priscilla and Aquila because the way that but let's praise him because he was willing to be corrected, right? Is my reasonableness evident to all? Anywhere else y'all wanted to go with that? Anybody else want to get out their gospel 2x4 and work? As long as you're working on each other, like if we're holding each, like if I get a whack with a 2x4 and you whack back, the 2x4 is okay. And that's going to happen every once in a while. All right. Let's see. So we're in 19. They arrive at Ephesus. He goes and reasons. They want him to spend more time. And he says, I'm going to come back if it's God's will. You see that around verse 21. And so he goes on to Ephesus, and he goes to Caesarea. He goes all the way to Jerusalem and greets the church in Antioch, which is kind of the church that helped him get his start, right? That's where all this started, where he gets to launch out from in 15. And after spending some time in Antioch, what does he do? And then you get those really fun names, Galatia and Phrygia. I think you got it right. And the end of verse 23, what is he doing? This is missionary journey number 3 is starting. So, and it doesn't give as much detail as it did the first time that they make the trip and they get back to Antioch and they report to the brethren there how everything's going, right? So now he's made the second loop and we don't get told it, but he goes back to Jerusalem and Antioch, the ones that basically had empowered him and Barnabas the first time, remember? This church is basically, helping encourage and financially support this ministry. So he circles back around and basically checks back into the home church, or his home base, and then he launches out. Kind of verse 23 is going to be starting of the third one. And it goes farther every time. But part of it is also re-strengthening places that he's already been. And so we're getting a picture of that. So while he's doing all that, who got left in Ephesus? A and P, or P and A, however you want. Which is interesting. At the beginning of 18, the husband is introduced first. And then just about every other time you read about him, the wife is mentioned first. And there's all kinds of speculative reasons why, and maybe she was the more articulate speaker or whatever, but it's interesting. The husband is mentioned first, and every time after that, it's the wife first. I have no idea why, but it is what it is. That's in there. So he kind of leaves them behind there to kind of do the work. And while all that's going on, here comes Apollos, comes into Ephesus. And again, just to review what is said about him in 24. Eloquent, mighty in the scriptures, but the NIV says he had a thorough knowledge of the scriptures, right? Scripture meaning what? Old Testament, Old Law. But verse 25, he's been, he's been instructed in the way of the Lord. And this is going to tie into my sermon this morning, so it's good that y'all will get it twice. He's been instructed in the way of the Lord, and he spoke with great fervor. He was eloquent, and kind of the middle of verse 25, he taught about Jesus accurately. Do you have something along that lines? But taught about who? He knows Jesus. Now, we know, though, that he only goes how far? But does that take baptism of John includes a knowledge of, and he's not just preaching, he's preaching Jesus. I'm almost about to have to stop, but I just want that in your head about what he's doing and what he knows. And he's going boldly in the synagogue. Reckon there's a reason why he's doing what he's doing? Where does he go first? I mean, that's where people that know the scriptures are, that should be excited about the fulfillment of the scriptures and that Jesus is here. He's doing the same thing Paul did. That's where he can find a ready-made audience who already knows the scripture, has a baseline understanding, and you can launch from there and teach Jesus to them from the scriptures. He's doing the same thing, and he's doing it mightily. And Priscilla and Aquila hear him, And they do what? Verse 26 towards the end. Where do they invite him? G. Paul, remind you of your hospitality lesson? Like, does hospitality ever converted people? Is there something about having somebody at your table that kind of lets us let down some guards and we can be more, I don't know, honest or open or real with one another? It's also more private. They don't. What's the main thing that we love about how Priscilla and Aquila teach Apollos? What does it say that they do? Yeah, but how? Well, but I'm talking about like yes, we know we teach them, but how do they do, Wes? Yeah, what does that mean?
Privately, gently,
Why? What's the wisdom of that?
humility.
Right? I don't just blast them in front of everybody, but hey, Apollos, why don't you come over to our house? And then there, not an attack. It's not like waiting on like an intervention, waiting on him when just because you get him to the house, you can still pounce on somebody at your house. But with using hospitality, using camaraderie, inviting him into their home, and they teach him the way of God more accurately. You reckon they get out of the gospel 2x4? Now, brother, you just been wrong on this and this and that. Or do you reckon there's similar of Paul? Let's start with where he is, and then let's take him a little further. Again, if you're not willing to hear, you're already eloquent. You're already educated. You're already having success preaching Jesus. And here's this couple's going to tell you something you don't already know. Yeah, they do. And to his credit, Apollos says, thank you. And he gets taught the way more adequately. Got to give this guy his credit, and like I said, allow ourselves to see ourselves in that own way. Apollos wants to go where in verse 27? Achaia, or however you pronounce that. It's not stated, but that's probably he wants to go to Corinth. And we know from the first and second letter to the Corinthians, Paul even said, I planted, Apollos, and God gave. And so Paul was the one that was the launching pad of Corinth, which we just read about in our book of Acts, this bridge book. And what's Apollos want to do? Hey, I'll go back there for you because Paul can't be everywhere. I'll go back there for you, and flat out states in 1 Corinthians, I planted, Apollos watered, and he works there with the brethren, strengthening the group that's already there. Just kind of showing it his remarkable ministry. And we know his success is because part of the division in Corinth is, I am of Paul, I am of Paul, and they're trying to use these guys against each other, and what they don't realize, hey, we're all one team. Y'all can divide all you want, that's on y'all, but we're the same team. To put that in there, I just wanted to kind of see that he wants to go do that, so they rather encourage him, and they write him kind of a letter to say, hey, validate, hey, this guy's legit, he's from us, and he is a great help to those who by grace had believed. He's successful in Corinth. He vigorously refuted his Jewish opponents in public debate, proving from the scriptures that Jesus was the Messiah. Where do you think I'm going to go with that last line of verse 28? What is it possible to do?
Preach Jesus from the Old Testament.
That's it. And not just preach him, but prove he is the Christ, the Messiah, and all I need is an Old Testament. All right, yes, ma'am?
You need to go to Romans 16, the first 5 verses, because it talks about Priscilla and Aquila and the church in their house.
Yes.
It talks about the first fruits of the
Achaia. Mm-hmm.
That's what all happened right there.
We mentioned Wednesday, every time we read about Priscilla and Aquila, someone is in their home or the church. Multiple times it mentioned the church that met in their home. That's the couple that they are. They're starting churches or their hospitality every single place that they go. And God blesses it and works through them to do it. Amen. All right, we'll stop there. We're going to get into 19 in the sermon. I kind of did that on purpose because otherwise we're never going to get done with this book. So you're going to get it. You're going to get double teamed. But we laid some groundwork that I won't have to go in as long this morning. It's 8 million degrees outside. But it's below zero in here. So meat, we hang meat in here. Yeah. If she only did, hey, you never know one day he may be.